On October 23, 2018, thousands of football fans were making their way to the game in Rome. Excitement for the game was high, and the fans began to chant and sing. At 7:03 p.m., around 50 people were riding the long escalator down to the platform. But within 30 seconds, the crowd had swelled to nearly double that. Everything seemed fine, but inside the escalator was a problem. The weight of the passengers was bearing down on the steps, and the load on the main motor was increasing. To try to slow the descent, the motor applied a counter-torque. But as the force continued to increase, the stairs began to move faster. By 7:04 p.m., the crowd had tripled. The motor finally reached its limit, and under the massive strain, the drum began to slip. With the motor losing control, the escalator triggered its second line of defense. A safety relay tripped, immediately cutting power to the motor. The main brake clamped down on the metal drum to stop the descent of the stairs. But it failed. The friction on the main drum wasn't enough to stop the motor from spinning, and the stairs continued to accelerate. Sensing the motor had lost control of the steps, the escalator engaged the last line of defense. In the event of an emergency, an auxiliary brake is designed to bypass the motor entirely and directly lock the drive shaft. Under normal circumstances, the chance that all three safety measures fail at the same time is vanishingly small. But these weren't normal circumstances. At 7:05 p.m., the third and final safety system failed, and the stairs began to plummet. Fans were flung forward and started streaming down the escalator. Some leapt over the central barrier in desperation, while others were swept into a crushing pileup. At the bottom, the landing became a dangerous choke point. Under the pressure, the steps twisted and buckled into jagged metal, leaving 24 people injured. Something like this shouldn't have been possible, and experts at the time knew that something had gone wrong, and they started to suspect foul play. In the aftermath, Rome's transit agency sealed off the accident site and closed the Republica station for several months. The authorities ordered both a technical and a criminal investigation, and the mayor even publicly vowed to discover the cause of the accident. So investigators began dismantling the wreck, tearing it down piece by piece to reconstruct what had happened. The ride people experienced on that escalator was one of the most terrifying rides of their lives, but maybe it's more similar to the origin of escalators than you might think. Like, what was the first escalator even used for? Do you want to have a guess? It was an attraction in a theme park all the way back in 1896. It had no steps, a 25-degree incline, and it was essentially just a slow conveyor belt made of metal and wooden parts. It brought people up a full 7 feet before they would have to walk down stairs on the other side. And it was a huge success. Over 75,000 people enjoyed the attraction during its 2-week stay at the Old Iron Pier on Coney Island. The ride was named the Continuous Elevator, and its inventor, Jesse Reno, had created it not just as an attraction, but as a proof of concept, because he saw it as the future of transportation. But as Reno watched people ride his invention, he began to notice a pattern. Nobody walked. Instead, they stood still, feet planted firmly sideways, with people gripping the handrail tightly. 2 years later, the department store Harrods in England installed a similar device. But the ride was so unsettling that Harrods had to put staff at the top to offer brandy to men and smelling salts to women, just to calm their nerves. See, for both devices, the 25-degree conveyor belt was precarious to walk on and unnerving to stand on. At around 12 degrees, walking on an incline becomes difficult, and 25 degrees is roughly the limit that our ankles can flex. If only there was a way to replace the conveyor belt with a moving set of stairs. Well, then the riders would always have a flat surface to stand on and a staircase they could climb if they wanted to. One attempt at a solution had already been around for 4 decades, and it was called the revolving stairs. It consisted of a chain that went around a loop. Then fixed stair-shaped blocks were attached to it, creating a flat surface to stand on during the main incline. But as soon as you'd reach the top, the steps tilted forward, making it treacherous to get off. And a similar problem plagued you at the bottom. Now you might think, if the top and bottom are causing problems, just extend each landing. But that also doesn't work. You just end up with a jagged mess for longer. So how do modern escalators solve this problem? I mean, have you ever stopped to think what happens to the stairs at the top of the escalator when they disappear? Clearly, we have steps going around in some sort of loop, but how do they actually behave on the return journey? What if I give you two options? Do they stay right side up, like the cabins in a Ferris wheel, or do they flip upside down and then flip back again at the other side?
I'm gonna go this one all day.
Yeah. Ferris wheel?
This one makes more sense.
Ferris wheel.
Yeah, this one.
I think they turn upside down.
And they're actually right side up.
I think I'm gonna go with the first
But
one.
wow, you're both, yeah.
The solution to this problem came from another inventor named George Wheeler. His idea forms the basis of every escalator in use today. A modern version of it works something like this. A typical subway escalator has an electric motor at the top with a power output of around 50 kilowatts, smaller than most electric cars. This motor spins extremely fast at over 1,000 RPM, but it's pretty weak. So to drive the steps, the escalator needs to convert this into a slower output with more force. To do this, it uses a reduction gearbox and a gear system, lowering the output to just a few RPM and increasing the torque by a factor of around 100. The motor is connected with a large sprocket to a reinforced steel chain which pulls the stairs around a loop. The so-called step chain is fitted with wheels to allow it to roll smoothly around curves. But unlike the design for the revolving stairs, Wheeler proposed attaching each step to this chain through a single axle, giving it the freedom to rotate. Next, he added a second set of wheels to each step that followed a different track, allowing him to control the angle of each step at any point. On the incline, the two tracks overlap, just like the revolving staircase. But then at the top, the two tracks separate, and this is what allows us to keep the steps level throughout the entire ride. The tracks then remain separated and curve around. The steps flip upside down, tuck into the loop, and start their return journey. At the start of the incline, the tracks rejoin, and the whole process repeats.
So the answer is you are both wrong.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Wow, I never really thought about that.
Yeah, like I would say it's like an upside down elevator, bro.
Like, guess what? You're right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But despite all modern escalators adopting Wheeler's design, at the time it caught so little attention that he was forced to shelve the idea. It wasn't until 8 years later that another inventor, Charles Seeberger, bought his patent and capitalized on the invention. Seeberger partnered with the Otis Elevator Company, and together they built a prototype. A year later, in 1900, they showcased it at the Paris Exposition Universelle. In total, 51 million people flocked to the exposition to see the marvels of modern technology. But one of the most popular exhibitions was the world's first true commercial escalator. The machine drew huge crowds. French historian Philippe Julien described it as the jolliest attraction at the exhibition, and wrote, "The escalator caused many an incident worthy of the vaudeville, separating families, sending old men sprawling, delighting the children, and reducing their nanas to despair." The escalator was even awarded one of the grand prizes of the fair. Shortly after, escalators started being installed in different places across the world. But